The world that existed before the collapse died quietly, but the world after it was born violently. What remains now is a stripped-down reality where every human becomes a variable in an equation that determines whether you live another day or disappear before sunrise. Comfort is gone. Assumptions are gone. Only consequences remain. The environment will eventually kill the unprepared, but people will kill you faster, and usually without warning. In the aftermath, threats are no longer dramatic. They're incremental, behavioral, and patient. The danger arrives wearing familiar faces, old habits, or friendly tones. That is why understanding human archetypes becomes a form of armor, and avoiding the wrong ones becomes a survival protocol as essential as water purification or fire discipline. Collapse reshapes the social landscape into a brutally simple system: assets and liabilities. There is no middle category. A person either enhances your operational capability or corrodes it from within. The old world tolerated inefficiency because it had buffers, laws, institutions, emergency services, and a surplus of time. Those buffers are now ash. What's left is a condensed battlefield where human weakness, fear, and hunger operate like weapons, and proximity to the wrong individual can trigger a chain of events that no amount of strength can undo. You are not navigating chaos. You are navigating human failure modes exposed by scarcity. This is why the naive belief that any group is safer than being alone is not only outdated, but fatal. A group amplifies both strength and dysfunction, and the wrong person multiplies risk faster than you can correct it. In a collapsed world, threat is not measured by volume but by trajectory, and the most dangerous individuals are not the loudest but the most predictable in their destructiveness. This assessment introduces the doctrine of behavioral threat archetypes, 6 categories of people whose presence erodes survival probability by design, instinct, or psychological collapse. These archetypes are not theoretical. They appear in every environment where structure breaks, from failed states to disaster zones. They are constant, reproducible, and lethal. Your objective is not to fix them, redeem them, or negotiate with them. Your objective is distance. The further you are from them, the clearer your decisions become, and the longer your life extends. What follows is not social commentary. It is a field manual for human avoidance. You are entering a landscape where alliances must be built on function, not sentiment, and where hesitation is indistinguishable from surrender. Survival begins with subtraction. Identify the threat, create the gap, maintain it without apology. That is the operational principle that governs every decision that follows. The first archetype emerges immediately after collapse: the panicked reactor. They are the human equivalent of an unstable chemical, harmless in isolation, catastrophic when introduced into any environment that demands precision. Panic is not an emotion in the post-collapse world. It is a force multiplier for disaster. The panicked reactor lives in a perpetual state of cognitive overload, where every stimulus becomes a threat, every noise becomes a signal to flee, and every second becomes an emergency. They do not act, they detonate, and the fallout contaminates everyone near them. Fear rewires their decision-making. Under collapse conditions, when systems fail and consequences become absolute, the panicked reactor becomes a liability that accelerates entropy. They forget instructions, misinterpret danger, and fracture under pressure. Their breathing becomes erratic. Their hands tremble. Their voice cracks at the wrong moment. A door is slammed too loudly. A flashlight is turned on at the worst possible angle. A crucial tool is dropped. A resource cache is exposed by accident. These are not harmless accidents. They are predictable precursors to lethal outcomes. In a world governed by scarcity and stealth, a single mistake is no longer an inconvenience. It is a broadcast signal announcing your location to whoever or whatever hunts in the dark. Their panic is contagious. Neurologically, humans mirror the emotional states around them, and in collapse environments, that mirroring accelerates. The panicked reactor infects the group with instability. They amplify tension until it becomes dysfunction, converting rational planning into scattered improvisation. Their voice rises when silence is the only shield. Their pacing disrupts the group's breathing rhythm. Their questions never stop because their mind never settles. They sabotage calm simply by existing, and calm is the most valuable currency after order disappears. Left unchecked, their instability escalates into chaos. They run when they should freeze. They freeze when they should run. They cling to you in moments when you require autonomy. They break formation at the worst time. They misread urgency and act on impulse. Their nervous system becomes the puppeteer of your survival chances. Trusting them with a task is a gamble you cannot afford, and trying to soothe them becomes a distraction you cannot justify. Extraction protocol is simple. Create distance before their fear becomes your fate. Identify the early warning signals, the rapid blinking, the compulsive scanning, the shallow breaths, the inability to process simple instructions. Do not attempt to stabilize them. Do not attempt to teach them resilience. Collapse conditions do not grant second chances for emotional rehabilitation. If they fracture once, they will fracture again, and the next break may occur in the moment that determines the difference between life and death. You avoid the panicked reactor not because they are bad, but because they are predictable. Their collapse is guaranteed, and your survival depends on eliminating guaranteed failures before they manifest. In this world, instability is a weapon, and they wield it involuntarily but consistently. The only winning move is distance. The second archetype surfaces slowly, almost politely, because its danger is not explosive, but corrosive. The chronic taker operates through accumulation of your labor, your time, your resources, and eventually your will to continue carrying them. In the old world, this person survived comfortably because society had surplus. There were safety nets, social programs, sympathetic friends, and structures designed to absorb the weight of those who refuse to carry their own. But collapse eliminates surplus. It eliminates buffers. It exposes the true cost of dependency in an environment where every calorie has a purpose and every hour has a price. The chronic taker presents themselves as harmless. Their threat disguises itself as vulnerability, charm, passivity, or even gratitude. They position themselves as someone who just needs a little help, but that little help becomes a routine, then an expectation, then an entitlement. You begin by offering assistance, believing it temporary, believing that they will eventually contribute, but contribution is not in their nature. Their instinct is extraction, and the extraction does not stop until you break the cycle or you collapse under the weight of sustaining them. In post-collapse conditions, resource flow becomes the governing law of survival. Calories are fuel. Tools are extensions of your body. Time is a weapon. Attention is a defensive asset. The chronic taker consumes all four and replaces them with nothing. They eat more than they produce, require supervision instead of autonomy, and drain emotional bandwidth when you need clarity. They do not sabotage you with malice. They sabotage you with inertia. Their existence becomes a tax, and the world after the fall allows no taxation without diminishing your ability to endure future threats. They occupy your mental space with constant small needs. A torn glove they want you to fix, a task they want you to explain again, a tool they borrowed and forgot to return, a mistake they made that now requires your correction. These micro-demands accumulate until your operational tempo slows, your vigilance drops, and your supply line weakens. Collapse is not only about staying alive, it is about managing your diminishing energy. And the chronic taker is an energy sinkhole. Their most dangerous trait is their adaptability. They sense generosity and exploit it. They sense guilt and weaponize it. They sense structure and hide within it. If your group has leaders, they play the victim to the leaders. If your group values unity, they frame their dependency as not wanting to be left out. If your group values cooperation, they pretend incompetence to force collective rescue. A chronic taker can camouflage within any system except one built on merit and discipline. That is why they thrive in early post-collapse groups, where people still cling to pre-collapse morality and instinctively protect the vulnerable. They anticipate this instinct. They rely on it. The cost of keeping them alive is not only physical, it is statistical. Every human in your proximity either raises or lowers your survival probability. A chronic taker reduces it by absorbing resources without increasing the group's capacity to generate more. Over time, they force difficult decisions, fewer rations, slower movement, compromised logistics, and weakened readiness. The world after collapse is unforgiving, and supporting a non-contributor is equivalent to diluting your strength in the face of certain danger. You cannot train them into resilience. You cannot motivate them into independence. Collapse does not transform people. It reveals them. The chronic taker has spent their entire life outsourcing responsibility, and a world without structure only amplifies that trait. They do not rise to the occasion. They sink deeper into the expectation that someone else will rise for them. The operational rule is simple and absolute. Protect your bandwidth. Your energy is finite. Your supplies are finite. Your capacity for patience is finite. Every unit you invest in someone who cannot sustain themselves is stolen from your future self, the one who will face hardship alone when the chronic taker inevitably falters. Extraction protocol begins the moment you notice the pattern. When someone gives less than they take, when they apologize more than they improve, when their gratitude never converts to initiative, distance is the only viable solution. You are not abandoning them. You are refusing to drown beside them. In collapse, survival is not cooperative by default. It is cooperative by merit, and the chronic taker possesses none. The third archetype is forged from a psychological dependency that the collapse destroys instantly: the authority addict. In the old world, this person survived by outsourcing their agency. They followed rules, obeyed systems, quoted policies, clung to routines, and built their identity around compliance. They were stable only because the structure around them was stable. But when the structure fell, they did not adapt. They simply continued searching for it like a ghost reaching for a vanished floor. Their danger lies not in aggression but in paralysis. They become a living void where initiative should be, and in a world where every second demands decisive action, a void is lethal. Authority addicts cannot operate in autonomy because autonomy forces responsibility, and responsibility forces self-determination. The collapse demands self-determination every minute, but these individuals freeze at decision points, unravel under uncertainty, and regress into a form of psychological childhood. They look for someone, anyone, to tell them what to do, what to think, where to stand, how to move. You become their manual, their law, their system, their fallback. They offload every mental burden onto you until your operational tempo fractures under their weight. They are dangerous because they attempt to resurrect the world that died. They cling to the idea that rules still exist, that someone somewhere is still in charge, that events are temporary, that rescue is coming, that order will return if they just obey a little longer. This fantasy turns them into obstacles, physical, emotional, and strategic. They oppose necessary actions because those actions violate their internal script of how the world should work. They question orders at the wrong moment. They hesitate when movement must be immediate. They cling to procedure even when procedure has no relevance except to delay your survival response. Their lack of initiative quickly mutates into resentment. Once they identify you as the de facto authority, whether or not you claim the role, they begin outsourcing blame to you as well. Every hardship becomes your fault. Every failure becomes your miscalculation. Every danger becomes evidence that you are not leading them properly. You become responsible for their existence in their mind. And once someone believes you owe them leadership, their resentment grows the moment your decisions no longer align with their comfort. They want leadership without the burden of following through. They want guidance without the discipline of execution. They want protection without sacrifice. Authority addicts also contaminate group cohesion. They whisper doubts, ask rhetorical questions, and subtly undermine the confidence of others, not out of malice, but out of fear. Their fear spreads horizontally, weakening the decisiveness of the entire structure. A group cannot withstand existential stress if one member continually introduces uncertainty disguised as concern. Every hesitation they broadcast becomes a crack that can widen into fractures when danger accelerates. Their paralysis becomes the group's paralysis, and paralysis and collapse is synonymous with death. In high-pressure moments, they become the slowest element in the formation. They delay movement, slow down transitions, and disrupt timing windows. In ambush scenarios, they are the one who stands exposed because they need instructions repeated. In evacuation scenarios, they are the one who asks questions while the window of escape narrows. In supply search operations, they are the one who misinterprets directions or freezes when encountering unexpected variables. Their failure mode is consistent: hesitation followed by collapse. And that collapse forces you to choose between abandoning them or dying beside them. The authority addict's final danger lies in their volatility. When their imagined structure fails, when their leader figure cannot save them or refuses to indulge their dependency, they turn critical, accusatory, sometimes even hostile. People who cannot control themselves try to control others. And when control fails, they look for someone to blame for the void inside them. That someone will be the person who carried them the longest. The extraction protocol is decisive. Break the dependency before it roots. You must never allow them to define you as their authority, even in small ways. Do not answer every question. Do not solve every problem. Do not allow them to convert your competence into their excuse for stagnation. Once dependency forms, it is irreversible, and they will anchor themselves to you until they drown both of you. Avoiding the authority addict is not cruelty, it is clarity. The collapse demands self-governance. It demands initiative. It demands a mind capable of acting without permission. Those who cannot function without orders do not survive long, and those who carry them do not survive much longer. The world ended. Hierarchy ended with it. Anyone who still needs it is already gone. They just haven't realized it yet. The fourth archetype conceals itself beneath composure, patience, and a quiet face that rarely reveals its true calculations. The hidden aggressor. In collapse conditions, overt brutality is easy to identify and easy to avoid. The real threat is the individual who does not explode outward, but corrodes inward, whose violence is not loud but simmering, whose instincts lean toward domination expressed through subtle cues rather than direct confrontation. They appear stable because they regulate their expression, but that regulation is not discipline. It is containment. Containment that will fail the moment scarcity or tension pushes them past their threshold. Unlike the panicked reactor, who destabilizes instantly, the hidden aggressor destabilizes gradually. They test boundaries in increments. They observe your reactions. They catalog weaknesses, hesitations, preferences. Their aggression begins as micro behaviors so small you could mistake them for personality quirks. Standing too close during moments of tension, watching you longer than necessary, dismissing your decisions with a technically polite tone, making comments about how things should be done, or questioning minor choices under the guise of curiosity. These are not accidents. They are reconnaissance. The hidden aggressor does not want chaos. They want control. And control requires understanding the psychological terrain of the group. They learn who is weak, who is strong, who is easily influenced, and who must be neutralized socially before being neutralized physically. Their aggression is strategic, not impulsive. They position themselves as useful, competent, or unbothered, creating the illusion that they are assets, but their contributions are merely currency. They invest early so they can withdraw power later. Once their confidence rises, the real nature surfaces. Scarcity is the catalyst that strips their mask. When food tightens, when territory becomes contested, when decision-making grows urgent, the hidden aggressor's suppressed hostility emerges through sharper tones, quicker judgments, or covert sabotage. They start framing disagreements as challenges to their status. They treat your caution as weakness. They treat group discussion as competition. They treat every tension point as a chance to climb the hierarchy. Under pressure, they begin dividing people subtly, insinuating doubts, highlighting mistakes, weaponizing small conflicts to position themselves as the most capable. In extreme scarcity, their aggression mutates into predation. They do not attack outright. They wait for compromised moments, fatigue after a long trek, emotional vulnerability after a loss, nighttime when vigilance dips. Their violence arrives when you are off balance because the hidden aggressor is not seeking victory. They are seeking dominance with minimal risk. They justify every step with rationalizations. Someone had to do it. You weren't thinking clearly. The group needed direction, masking violence as necessity. Collapse environments are fertile ground for this justification because necessity becomes the universal excuse. The danger they pose is not only physical, but structural. Their presence corrodes trust within the group. Every action becomes suspect. Every silence becomes loaded. Every plan becomes contested. You begin wasting cognitive bandwidth anticipating their interference. That mental drain weakens your strategic clarity, and clarity is the last thing you can afford to lose when the environment is already predatory. Groups fracture from within more often than they fall to external threats, and the hidden aggressor is the architect of such fractures. Detection requires attention to subtlety. Watch for patterns, not moments. One moment of irritation means nothing. A pattern of quiet dominance does. The way they observe arguments without intervening. The smirk hidden behind a neutral face when someone else falters. The unsolicited advice framed as benevolence. The lingering pauses before answering strategic questions, as if calculating the best rhetorical angle rather than the best survival outcome. These details form a behavioral fingerprint. Once identified, the operational principle is absolute. Small patterns predict large betrayals. Do not wait for proof. Proof arrives too late, usually in the form of an ambush, a theft, or a sudden shift in group allegiance. You do not confront them publicly. That only activates their predatory instincts early. You create distance gradually, reducing their access to information, resources, and influence. You do not allow them into roles of authority, and you do not assign them tasks that grant leverage. If the group cannot or will not see the threat, extraction becomes personal. You separate your path from theirs before proximity becomes a death sentence. Avoiding the hidden aggressor is not paranoia. It is pattern recognition. The collapse removes the boundaries that once restrained these individuals. What was once subtle manipulation becomes open predation. Their hostility is a storm waiting for the right pressure drop. Your survival depends on not being present when the containment finally breaks. The fifth archetype is the romantic risk-taker, the person who treats collapse as a stage for their fantasies rather than a battlefield governed by math. In the old world, their recklessness was masked by safety nets, ambulances, insurance, second chances, strangers who intervened before consequences arrived. But when the world fell, those nets vanished, leaving only the raw physics of reality. And physics is not impressed by courage, style, or narrative. It rewards caution and punishes theatrics. Yet the romantic risk-taker still behaves as if heroism can override probability, as if momentum can outrun danger, as if their instincts are more accurate than your preparation. They do not understand that survival is not an adventure. It is a cold equation. These individuals chase danger because danger validates them. The collapse does not terrify them. It excites them. They interpret catastrophe as an invitation to reinvent themselves as warriors, scouts, renegades, outlaws, visionaries. They craft internal stories about being the one who dares, the one who charges ahead, the one who won't live in fear. But in collapse conditions, fear is not weakness. Fear is intelligence. Fear is a sensory warning system honed by millions of years of evolution. The romantic risk-taker disables that system and replaces it with impulse. Their recklessness manifests subtly at first. They challenge guidelines you establish for movement, noise control, or resource allocation. They wander farther than instructed. They touch structures that look unstable. They test boundaries just to see what's possible. They insist on taking shortcuts because they feel lucky or skilled. They treat the environment as if it cares about their confidence. And every unnecessary risk they take generates new variables you are forced to manage, variables that drain time, attention, and energy. When confronted, they often disguise recklessness as optimism. Relax. It'll be fine. Don't overthink everything. This language is not casual. It is ideological. They believe that caution is a cage, and that surviving without thrill is the same as not living. But collapse does not reward thrill. It rewards discipline. It rewards repetition. It rewards boredom. The safest survivors are those who execute dull routines with precision, not those who feel the need to break monotony with adrenaline. The romantic risk-taker is also a contagion. Their behavior influences others, especially those who are young, inexperienced, or mentally vulnerable. They mock fear, glamorize boldness, and create an atmosphere where caution feels like cowardice. This is how groups die, not through a single reckless act, but through the normalization of gambles. When one person jumps gaps, climbs unstable structures, or explores buildings alone, someone else eventually mirrors it. And the cost of one mirrored mistake can be collective catastrophe. Under prolonged scarcity, their behavior escalates. Risk becomes identity. Identity becomes stubbornness. Stubbornness becomes defiance. They take increasingly larger risks because smaller ones no longer deliver stimulation. They feel constrained by procedure, resent operational discipline, and rebel when told no. And rebellion in collapse is not ideological. It is fatal. When they endanger themselves, they endanger everyone forced to rescue them. When they wander too far, they expose the group's presence. When they seek excitement, they attract predators, human or otherwise. Their greatest danger is the illusion of capability. Romantic risk-takers often believe they possess rare intuition or talent. They claim to sense things, to know their limits, to trust their gut. But their gut is not calibrated to collapse conditions. It is calibrated to a former life where mistakes were cheap. In the new world, mistakes are debts that must be paid in blood, and the romantic risk-taker keeps signing the group's name on loans they cannot repay. You cannot reason them into caution because caution threatens their self-image. You cannot show them consequences because they believe consequences apply to others. Collapse amplifies their fantasies until those fantasies become delusions, and delusions escalate until reality finally retaliates with force. And when it does, the romantic risk-taker does not die alone. They take rescuer, companion, or follower with them. Extraction protocol demands cold clarity. You do not negotiate safety with someone who feeds on risk. You do not compromise procedure to preserve their pride. You do not allow their charisma to soften your judgment. The moment you see them romanticizing danger, distancing themselves from protocol, or framing the world as a story where they are the protagonist, you sever operational ties. Distance is not preference, it is survival. Avoiding the romantic risk-taker is an act of mathematical intelligence. They gamble because they think the world still tolerates gambles. It does not. The collapse rewards only those who understand that risk is not adventure. It is probability. And they are its future casualty long before they become yours. The sixth archetype masquerades not as weakness, recklessness, or latent violence, but as virtue. They are the morality dealer, the individual who believes collapse has granted them the authority to define what is right, what is wrong, and who deserves to live according to their personal creed. In the old world, these people hid behind institutions, ethics committees, online outrage, and social frameworks that rewarded moral signaling over practical reasoning. But when the world breaks, morality does not disappear. It mutates. And for the morality dealer, collapse becomes a pulpit. Their doctrine becomes law. Their judgment becomes weapon. Their idealism becomes tyranny disguised as compassion. Unlike the hidden aggressor, whose threat emerges from predatory calculation, the morality dealer's threat emerges from ideological rigidity. They cannot adapt because adaptation feels like betrayal to their internal code. They cling to principles even when those principles contradict survival. They refuse hard choices because they believe necessity should bow to ideals. They hold on to concepts like fairness, equality, mercy, or justice as if the collapse cares about them. But physics does not negotiate. Scarcity does not compromise. Danger does not respect moral frameworks. The world after the fall renders old ethics obsolete, yet the morality dealer clings to them with religious fervor. Their danger appears through criticism framed as conscience. They will question your decisions not on functional grounds, but on ethical ones. Is this really who we want to become? Are we better than this? There must be another way. But in collapse, another way usually means death delayed, not death avoided. The morality dealer reframes necessary actions, ration cuts, tactical retreats, exclusions of liabilities, preemptive measures, as moral failures rather than survival protocols. They infect the group with hesitation by making people feel guilty for choosing life over sentiment. Guilt is not harmless under collapse. Guilt weakens clarity. Clarity determines whether you act in time. A single moment of hesitation caused by moral questioning can fracture your survival timeline. Their idealism becomes a form of sabotage. They argue for saving people who drain resources. They defend individuals who cannot contribute. They demand interventions for those who refuse discipline. They guilt-trip the group into taking risks to prove we haven't lost our humanity. But humanity is not preserved through martyrdom. It is preserved through endurance. And endurance requires sacrifice of comfort, illusion, and sometimes compassion. The morality dealer cannot accept this because their self-worth is tied to a moral identity. Without that identity, they collapse. So instead, they force the world around them to bend to it. Under stress, their moral rigidity transforms into manipulation. They leverage the group's desire to remain decent. They weaponize shame. They frame your pragmatism as cruelty. They whisper doubts into the ears of those who still cling to pre-collapse sentiment. They sow division by painting you as hardened, ruthless, or compromised. They claim moral superiority while offloading the cost of their high principles onto your shoulders. You become the one who makes the hard choices while they retain the image of purity. This dynamic corrodes group cohesion. The collapse does not break groups through force. It breaks them through internal conflict, and the morality dealer is an architect of that conflict. And when ideals fail to protect them, as they inevitably do, they do not question the ideals. They question you. Their worldview cannot be wrong, so you must be. Their ideology cannot collapse, so you must have betrayed it. They redirect blame, painting you as the cause of every harsh reality they cannot emotionally tolerate. This externalization of responsibility escalates into hostility, and hostility from a moral zealot is far more dangerous than hostility from a predator. A predator wants advantage. A zealot wants vindication. Predators can be negotiated with. Zealots cannot. The world after the collapse rejects dogma because dogma is brittle. It cannot bend. Therefore, it breaks. And when it breaks, it drags everyone attached to it into the fall. The morality dealer believes they are preserving humanity, but what they are actually preserving is memory. Memory of a society that no longer exists, a value system that no longer applies, a comfort that cannot return. The collapse demands adaptation. They demand adherence. Those two demands cannot coexist. Extraction protocol is non-negotiable. Identify the early signs. Moral absolutism, guilt language, refusal to prioritize survival over emotion, the need to be seen as good rather than effective. When you notice these traits, you detach immediately. You cannot convert a zealot into a pragmatist. You cannot debate them into clarity. Their worldview is their identity, and identity does not change under pressure. It calcifies. Staying near them is a slow death because they will sabotage your decisions until the day your hesitation kills you. Avoiding the morality dealer is not a rejection of morality. It is a rejection of moral delusion. Survival is not the absence of ethics. It is the recalibration of ethics to match reality. The collapse does not punish the wicked and reward the noble. It punishes the unadapted and rewards the prepared. The morality dealer refuses adaptation, and those who refuse adaptation do not survive. Staying near them means you won't either. When the world collapses, the environment becomes harsh, the resources become scarce, and the nights become long. But none of these are your primary threat. The greatest danger is, and has always been, human behavior under pressure. The 6 archetypes you have just crossed, panic, dependency, obedience, suppressed violence, reckless fantasy, and moral absolutism, are not abstract categories. They are predictable failure modes. They are psychological fractures waiting for the right stress to split open. And in collapse, every fracture becomes a blade. You are not avoiding individuals. You are avoiding trajectories. The panicked reactor always spirals. The chronic taker always drains. The authority addict always collapses. The hidden aggressor always escalates. The romantic risk-taker always gambles. The morality dealer always condemns. These outcomes are not possibilities. They are inevitabilities. In the absence of structure, humans revert to their default programming, and default programming is the most honest version of a person. The collapse removes choice, removes pretense, removes the luxury of personal reinvention. What remains is the architecture of the mind, laid bare and unprotected. You survive by recognizing weak architecture before it caves in on you. There is a doctrine that governs all post-collapse relationships, simple and ruthless in its clarity. Survival is subtraction. You do not strengthen yourself by adding more people into your orbit. You strengthen yourself by removing those who erode your stability, your focus, and your longevity. Every distance you create from the wrong human becomes a shield. Every boundary becomes a reinforcement. Every severed tie becomes a correction to your survival probability. You are not being callous. You are being strategic. In a world without support systems, you are your own structure, and structures fail from overload long before they fail from impact. These 6 archetypes thrive on your hesitation. They exploit your empathy, your sense of responsibility, your instinct to protect, your desire to maintain the last remnants of the old world's humanity. But collapse is not a test of kindness. It is a test of alignment. You must align your decisions with the cold mechanics of reality. When you feed a taker, you starve yourself. When you guide an authority addict, you slow your own movement. When you placate a hidden aggressor, you invite long-term sabotage. When you follow a risk-taker, you enter futures you cannot recover from. When you absorb guilt from a morality dealer, you surrender your clarity. This is the cost. Every threat has a price, and the price is always extracted from your future. The people you avoid define the dangers you won't face. More importantly, the people you avoid define the person you get to remain. You are not here to save everyone. You are here to maintain the small, precise circle of individuals who enhance your capacity to endure the next hour, the next day, the next season. The collapse is a filter, and your task is to ensure you are not filtered out by someone else's weakness. You walk through this world differently now. You evaluate faces not by familiarity, but by function. You assess behaviors with surgical detachment. You measure loyalty not by words, but by actions under strain. You understand that the apocalypse is not merely a crisis, it is an amplifier. And survival is the art of reducing all unnecessary noise. Carry this clarity into every encounter. Let it sharpen your intuition, refine your decisions, and fortify your boundaries. Do not wait for proof. Do not wait for confirmation. By the time the threat reveals itself fully, it is already too late. Your advantage is foresight. Your power is distance. Your life is the consequence of the humans you refuse to let near you. In the post-collapse world, you survive not by holding on, but by letting go. The world ended. You did not. Now your task is simple. Guard that fact without apology.